Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's grant solicitation webinar, Comprehensive School-Based Approach to Youth Violence and Victimization. My name is William Moore, and I am with the National Training and Technical Assistance Center. As your host today, I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few features of the Adobe Connect webinar platform and provide a few announcements to keep in mind. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be published on NTTAC's YouTube page. The webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube channel, where you can also view past webinars. For the event transcript and supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP NTTAC Help Desk. For those wishing to download a copy of the PowerPoint slides and other important documents, you may do so by locating the handouts pod directly above the chat area. Here, you will also find an FAQ for webinar participants that will likely address any technical related questions. Simply click on the file name and then click the download button. During today's webinar, presenters Eric will be addressing your questions during our Q&A segment of the webinar. Please type your questions into the chat box as they arise. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute to help us count. Go to the chat window and type in the total number of additional people with you in the room today. If you are viewing alone, there is no need to type anything into the chat pod at this time. And so I'll give people just a couple of seconds to do that. Again, please just take a few minutes to type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If you're viewing alone, there is no need to type anything at this time. Following today's webinar, attendees will be sent a certificate of attendance. This certificate is sent approximately 1 hour following the conclusion of the event and is sent via an Adobe Connect thank you email. Please keep an eye out on your email for the certificate, and please note that only participants that are registered and signed in will receive a certificate of attendance. At the conclusion of today's webinar, you will be provided with a link to a brief evaluation about today's presentation. The feedback you provide is used to assist in future planning and training. I will now turn today's grant solicitation webinar over to our moderator and presenter, Eric Stansberry, for today's webinar.
Good afternoon. The Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention is a component of the Office of Justice Programs within the U.S. Department of Justice. Its vision, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, envisions a nation where our children are free from crime and violence. If they come into contact with the justice system, the contact should be both just and beneficial to them. OJJDP provides national leadership, coordination, and resources to prevent and respond to juvenile delinquency and victimization. OJJDP supports the efforts of states, tribes, and communities to develop and implement effective and equitable juvenile justice systems that enhance public safety, ensure youth are held appropriately accountable to both crime victims and communities, and empower youth to live productive, law-abiding lives. This webinar's objectives today are to provide a general overview of the FY 2019 Comprehensive School-Based Approach to Youth Violence and Victimization. It will highlight key eligibility and solicitation requirements, provide an overview of project goals and objectives, and detail the application process. An overview of the Comprehensive School-Based Approach to Youth Violence and Victimization. This program supports a comprehensive effort to address youth violence and victimization through implementing evidence-based prevention, intervention, and accountability efforts in a school-based setting. The goals of the program are reduce the incidence of school violence through accountability efforts for offenders, respond to victimization, exposure to violence, and trauma as a result of violence that occurs in the school, community, or family, improve school safety and climate, and prevent violence, delinquency, and victimization in the targeted community. This strategy acknowledges the need for supportive interventions as well as accountability measures. The comprehensive school-based approach to youth violence and victimization solicitation, which release date was March 21st, 2019. The closing date is May 20, 2019. Periods of performance duration of 36 months. Budget should match the proposed project period and should be allocable and reasonable in support of the project design. There are two categories of funding available. Category 1 are the project sites. This program supports the efforts of eligible applicants to develop or enhance their capacity to address youth violence and victimizations through school-based programming and interventions targeting student and community needs. All program activities must occur within a school setting. This can include programming in either public or private schools. Category 2, training and technical assistance. In addition to supporting program implementation and direct service activities, this initiative will fund a training and technical assistance provider to support Category 1 program sites. Eligibility. For Category 1 project sites, eligible applicants are limited to states, units of local government, public and private agencies, federally recognized Indian tribal governments as determined by the Secretary of the Interior. Eligible applicants that propose to provide direct service to youth must not include youth who are age 18 or over in the population they will serve, with the exception of youth enrolled in a targeted school implementing the program. Project sites can be implemented in either public or private school settings. For Category 2, training and technical assistance, eligible applicants are limited to nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations, including tribal nonprofit and for-profit organizations, and institutions of higher education, including tribal institutions of higher education. For-profit organizations must forego any profit or management fee. The goals of the program are to reduce the incidence of school violence through accountability, efforts for offenders including innovative programs, suspension, expulsion, and arrests. Enhance the capacity of communities and schools to address youth violence and exposure to violence through evidence-based intervention services. Improve school safety and climate, and prevent violence, delinquency, and victimization in the targeted community. Category 1 project sites goals and objectives, applicants are expected to have an existing strategic plan for addressing youth violence and victimization. Their projects should work to enhance existing school-based practices addressing youth violence and victimization and fill in gaps with programming. Category 1 comprehensive approach should include new and existing efforts in the following core areas. They are as follows: provision of evidence-based mental health services for youth who experience trauma and exposure to violence in the school setting. Universal bullying prevention and conflict resolution programming. Student engagement to provide peer support networks. Youth competence building interventions for accountability across the continuum of least intensive, innovative, diversion treatment programs to more intensive suspension, expulsion, arrest with proper considerations for campus safety and promotion of an appropriate learning environment and school safety and climate measures. Implementation strategies should include school-wide programming, targeted interventions for youth involved in violence, including youth identified as at risk for delinquency and/or youth involved in the juvenile justice system. Family outreach and relationship building. OJDP encourages applicants to design and implement a referral, screening, and assessment process to effectively target and intervene with youth and students at the highest risk for violence and delinquent behavior. Activities proposed must be responsive to the specific needs identified by a multidisciplinary, multi-agency collaborative stakeholder group. Applicants should consider replicating programs and practices known to produce positive outcomes. Examples of programs considered effective in addressing exposure to violence, delinquency prevention, and accountability include, but are not limited to, positive behavior intervention support, PBIS, cognitive behavior intervention for trauma in schools, structured psychotherapy for adolescents responding to chronic stress, school resource officers, youth mentoring. Other program-specific interventions include youth courts, street law, gang resistance and education training, and violence-free zones. OJDP expects program sites to work closely with the selected training and assistance providers for this initiative, include their community partners and stakeholders. Category 2, training and technical assistance. The goal is to develop and design and deliver training and technical assistance that supports and guides the program sites as they implement their school-based strategies to address youth violence and victimization at school and in the community. Applicants must demonstrate competency in providing training and technical assistance to a wide range of communities, agencies, and disciplines on evidence-based practices used to address youth violence and victimization, violence reduction, delinquency prevention, and accountability. Multidisciplinary collaborative team development, including building community support and involvement, conducting systems assessment, and developing strategic implementation plans, identifying and collecting data that document the progress of program implementation. The objectives include assess the individual and collective training and technical assistance needs of project sites and develop technical assistance plans for each site. Provide guidance and consultation to the funded program sites. Support the provision of content training to project site staff to increase their capacity to implement strategies to address youth violence and victimization, and to arrange on-site consultation by diverse subject matter experts. Objectives further include establish tools and practical techniques for working across different disciplines to facilitate information sharing, communication, and coordination. Develop and maintain a pool of experts. Facilitate peer-to-peer information sharing and learning communities between the project sites. Perform all logistics to support training, technical assistance activities, and events. Plan and coordinate in conjunction with OJDP annual grantee cross-site meetings. The type of awards. OJJDP expects to make awards under this selection in the form of cooperative agreement. Under OJP Cooperative Agreement Awards, responsibility for the day-to-day conduct of the funded project rests with the recipient. OJP, however, may have substantial involvement in matters such as substantive coordination of technical efforts and site selection, as well as review and approval of project work plans, research designs, data collection, instruments, and major project-generated materials. In addition, OJP often indicates in the award terms and conditions that it may redirect the project if necessary. You may find additional information regarding cooperative agreements and what this means for you as an applicant looking at page 7 of the solicitation. Also see the administrative national policy and other legal requirements section of the OJP grant application resource guide for a brief discussion. The awards. Category 1 project sites, the maximum number of awards OJP expects to make is 8. The estimated maximum dollar amount for each award is up to $775,000. The period of performance start date is October 1, 2019. Period of performance duration is 36 months. Category 2, the training technical assistance. Maximum number of awards OJP expects to make is 1. Estimated maximum dollar amount up to $800,000. The period of performance start date is October 1, 2019, and the period of performance duration is 36 months. There's priority considered for those applicants. Encouraging program investments in economic and distressed communities, qualified opportunity zones. Under this program, OJP will, as appropriate, give priority consideration and awards decisions to applications that propose projects that directly benefit federally designated qualified opportunity zones. Applicants should include information in the application that specifies how the project will enhance public safety in the specified zone. For resources and a list of designated qualified opportunity zones, see the U.S. Department of Treasury's resource web page at www.cdfund.gov/pages/opportunity zones. This information is listed in page 7 of the solicitation. The application process. OJDP has designated the following application elements as critical for categories 1 and 2. The program narrative, the budget detail worksheet, the budget narrative. Category 1 applicants also have additional critical elements of a strategic action plan and a memorandum of understanding. Here's what should be included in the applications. SF-424, a project abstract, program narrative, a 30-page limit, budget detail worksheet and budget narrative, indirect cost rate, tribal authorization resolution if applicable. Financial management and system of internal controls questionnaire, disclosure of lobbying activities, documentation of anticipated benefit of qualified opportunity zones, if applicable, disclosure and justification, DOJ high-risk grantees, if applicable, additional attachments, for instance, an executive summary charge. Projects should work to reduce the adverse impact of violence on youth, families, and neighborhoods through school-based approaches. It must be multidisciplinary in approach, including a multi-agency team of stakeholders. At minimum, stakeholders should include county, local public sector leadership, educators, and leadership from the target schools, courts, probation, law enforcement, mental health, child welfare and social service, and youth-serving community organizations. The team structure must be referenced in the program narrative and can be submitted as an attachment. Project abstract should summarize the program in 400 words or less. The abstract should briefly describe the project's purpose, the population to be served, program category, and activities that the applicant will implement to achieve the project's goals and objectives. The abstract should describe how the applicant will measure progress towards these goals. The abstract should indicate whether the applicant will use any portion of the project budget to conduct research, as described in Note on Project Evaluations on page 16 of the solicitation. All project abstracts should follow the detailed template available at www.ojp.gov/funding/apply/resources/project abstract. The program narrative applicant must submit a program narrative that presents a detailed description of the purpose, goals, objectives, and strategies, design, and management of the proposed program. Program narrative should be double-spaced with 1-inch margins not exceeding 30 pages of 8.5 by 11, and use a standard 12-point font, preferably Times New Roman. Pages should be numbered 1 of 30, etc. table, charts, pictures, etc., including all captions, legends, keys, subtext, etc., may be single-spaced and will count in the 30-page limit. Material required under the budget narrative and additional attachment section will not count towards the program narrative page count. The program narrative should address the following selected criteria: description of the issue, goals and objectives, performance measures, program design and implementation, capabilities and competencies. Applicants should briefly describe the nature and scope of the problems that the program will address. The applicant should use data to provide evidence that the problem exists, demonstrate that the size and scope of the problem, and document the effects of the problem on the target community, population, and the larger community. Applicants should describe the target population and any previous or current attempts to address the problem. The project design. Applicants should describe how the project will operate throughout the funding period and describe the strategy that they've used to achieve the goals and objectives identified. They will describe how they will complete the deliverables stated in the goals and objectives and deliverables. They will discuss how the proposed plan addresses youth violence, prevention, intervention, and accountability. They will provide details regarding any leveraged resources. They will also provide a description of the team structure, the collaborative, as referenced in the program narrative, and can be submitted as an attachment. The logic model. Applicants should include a logic model that graphically illustrates how the performance measures are related to the project's problems, goals, and objectives and design. Applicants should submit the logic model as a separate attachment. Applicants should submit a realistic timeline or milestone chart that indicates major tasks associated with the goals and objectives of the project, assigns responsibilities for each, and plots completion of each task by month or quarter for the duration of the award, using year one, month one, quarter one, etc. Applicants should submit the timeline as a separate attachment. Under capabilities and competencies, this section should describe the experience and capability of the applicant organization and any contractors or sub-grantees that the applicant will use to implement and manage this effort. Highlighting any previous experience implementing projects of similar design or magnitude and competencies in specified areas. Applicants should highlight their experience, capability, and capacity to manage sub-awards, including details on their system for fiscal accountability. Management and staffing patterns should be clearly connected to the project design. Applicants should describe the roles and responsibilities of the project staff, explain the program's organizational structure and operations. Applicants should include a copy of an organizational chart. Memorandum of Understanding for Category 1 applicants. Applicants must submit memorandums of understanding as a separate attachment for all agencies involved in the planning and program implementation. The MOU must demonstrate understanding of the goals of the proposal, expression of support for the program, description of the roles and responsibilities of the signing agencies, estimate of the percentage of time the agency would devote to the planning and operation of the project. If submitting a joint application for either category described under eligibility, applicants should provide signed and dated letters of support or memorandum of understanding for all key partners. Letters of support may be addressed to the OJJDP administrator. Only letters of support that are submitted by the due date with the full application will be considered. The budget details should provide detailed computation for each budget line item, listing the total cost of each and showing how it was calculated by the applicant. The budget detail worksheet should include a thorough and clear description of every cost listed in the narrative section for each budget category. OJP expects proposed budget to be complete, cost-effective, and allowable. Applicants should the budget funds to support as many as 2 staff to travel to an annual 2-day peer learning collaborative meeting. See the budget preparation and submission information section of the OJP Grant Application Resource Guide for more details about the budget detail worksheet and other information such as information on proposed subawards, proposed procurement contracts, and pre-agreement costs. The Grant Application Resource Guide can be accessed at https://ojp.gov/funding/apply/resources/grants. Information on proposed procurement contracts should be part of the application submitted as well. Applicant disclosure of pending applications and the executive summary charge. Additional attachments include, as mentioned in logic model, timeline or milestone chart, resume of key personnel, job descriptions outlining roles and responsibilities for all key positions, and the multi-agency team composition. The selection criteria. Applications that meet basic minimum requirements will be evaluated by peer reviewers using the following review criteria. Description of the issue is 20%. Project design and implementation is 35%. Capabilities and competencies, 25%. A plan for collecting the data required for this solicitation, performance measures, 10%. And last, the budget is 10% complete, cost-effective, and allowable. Budget narratives should demonstrate generally how applicants will maximize cost-effectiveness of grant expenditures. Budget narratives should demonstrate cost-effectiveness in relation to potential alternatives and the goals of the project. OJP is committed to ensuring a fair and open process for awarding grants. OJJDP reviews the application to make sure that the information presented is reasonable, understandable, measurable, and achievable, as well as consistent with the solicitation. Peer reviewers will review the application submitted under this solicitation that meets the basic minimum requirements. OJJDP may use internal peer reviewers, external peer reviewers, or a combination to review the applications. Other important considerations for OJJDP include geographic diversity, strategic priorities, and available funding. There's additional information online. General information on applying for OJJDP awards can be found at https://www.ojjdp.gov/funding/funding. Answers to frequently asked questions that may assist applicants are posted at www.ojjdp.gov/grants/solicitations FY 2019 FAQ CYVP.
Great. Well, thank you, Eric. It looks like we do have a few questions that have come in from our audience. So I'll start with our first question here. So are applicants allowed to have subgrantees under this solicitation? And could the subgrantees include K-12 educational partnerships, for example, local education agencies or school districts?
Yes to both questions. They can have sub-recipients, and the local educational agency can be a partner to the effort as well.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. Now, this question is regarding the targeted youth population for this solicitation. Are targeted youth required to be in the juvenile justice system already?
That's not specified as a requirement. This is a school-based intervention prevention effort. It's universally applied, but the cutoff age for those participants in this program will have to be under 18 years of age.
Great, thank you. So Eric, our next question, can nonprofits or private nonprofit agencies apply to any of the categories of this grant solicitation?
Applicant eligibility is as follows for Category 1 project sites. Eligible applicants are limited to states, units of local government, public and private agencies, and federally recognized Indian tribal governments, as determined by the Secretary of the Interior. Nonprofits are eligible to apply under Category 1.
Okay, great. Now, next question here. In regards to submission of applications, if I submit the application over the weekend, how will I know it was successfully submitted?
The grants management system has a way of letting you know if the award has been duly inputted, and you will get a notification letting you know such that the award has been submitted and certainly certified.
Okay, okay. And am I able to maybe retract or even modify my application submission?
Certainly applications can be amended after being submitted, and certainly as long as you're mindful of the date that is due, the cutoff date, as long as it meets that the period of time that's submitted.
Okay, thank you. And what if I submit 2 applications? Which one will you all review?
The most recent submission will be the one that gets reviewed.
Okay, all right, great. And again, could you repeat the date when the announcements for this grant will be made?
We're projecting that it will be made in early October. That would be the goal.
Okay, great. Thank you, Eric. So looks like we do have a couple of other questions that have come in through the audience Q&A, and so I'll give you a couple of seconds to look through those questions and see if I have it there, and if you have any other questions you'd like to address here.
Let's Category 1 application is acceptable to submit a letter of commitment from collaborators instead of an MOU. Oh, I saw 2 things mentioned. There was MOUs as well as letter of support. So I'm inclined to say we will look at certainly letters of commitment, as long as it meets the various criteria that was set forth for the MOU in terms of the roles and responsibilities committed to the project. For Category 2, are logic models required in the proposal? Yes. What are the standards for evidence-based? What are the standards for the term evidence-based? Those will be the models of practice that the officers have come to identify. Only gave some suggested programs that meet that criteria. I suggest that you submit to grants@ncjrs.gov, and certainly we could give you some clear indications of how that applies, and I think that's the way I would go there. Does the public school system by itself qualify as an applicant? A public school system can apply for these funds, yes.
Let's see, Eric, we do have a clarifying question that came in regarding the nonprofits. Could you restate again regarding the eligibility of nonprofits to apply?
Applicant eligibility is as follows for Category 1 project sites. Eligible applicants are limited to states, units of local government, public and private agencies, and federally recognized Indian tribal governments, as determined by the Secretary of the Interior. Nonprofits are eligible to apply under Category 1. Please address all solicitation questions to the Respond Center at 800-851-3420 or email at grants@ncjrs.gov.
And then are the nonprofits, could they be part of a multi-agency team or a sub-recipient nonprofits?
Yes, they can. It can be part of a multi-agency team, yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Can project sites funded in Category 1 be as large as a state or city? Yes. Does the Category 2 applicant also have a Category 1 applicant? I'm not real sure. I suggest you send that question to NCJRS grants at ncjrs.gov. That question pertaining to the are LEAs eligible to be the lead applicant if the county is an MOU partner? Yes, I would say yes, that would be appropriate. Do the mental health services have to be provided in a school setting? Or are the mental health services limited to school violence that occurs on a school campus? I'm going to ask that you submit that to the NCJRS grants.gov. Is OJDP interested in supporting juvenile court and community schools or adult ed school systems? Because, let's see the rest. Is OJ interested in supporting juvenile court and community schools or adult ed school systems? I'm not real sure what that.
Looks like, Eric, they are meaning to say alternative education there for the acronym for Alt Ed.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yes, so it looks like they were, asking if OJJDP supporting the juvenile court in community schools or even alternative education school systems because they routinely have the older target population, that 16 to 24 age range.
Again, I would suggest forwarding that question so I could get an answer for that person. Grants at ncjrs.gov.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Do the mental health service have to be provided in a school setting? Or the mental health service is limited to school violence that occurs on school campus? So those two separate issues. I think it behooves the applicant to tell us where they would support having those services provided, in the community or in the school setting. There's no dictate here. For those applying to Category 2, should the narrative describe the issue at a national level? I think the program narrative speaks to the target community that's going to be served. Certainly it can be framed by the various broader issues, but I think the focus should be on the targeted community for which the project designs are being set up for. Does the MOU have to be the final signed version, or can it be a draft in progress? I'm trying to discern what's a draft in progress means. You don't have all the partners. One would suspect that for MOU, you'd have the various signatories that would certainly speak to the commitments of the partners as part of the collaborative. So I would hope that that would be as fully endorsed by those people that are part of the collaborative at that time. Can a school board be an applicant? I would say yes. Does a Category 1 applicant need to identify their own Category 2 tech support agency and write a separate proposal? Will the Category 2 agency be assigned by OJJDP? Well, I'm going to be very clear. There are two separate funding categories, and certainly those aspiring to be part of that pool, and no way to determine who that might be. So to answer that person's question, I don't think the Category 1 applicant efforts should be directed towards trying to identify a Category 2 support agency at this time. For agency, Department of Probation applying and planning implementation of a program, is an MOU required? And so with whom? An MO certainly would be, or a letter of support required, yes. Sometimes it could be the administrative partner for an agency identified through the project, or the official departmental representative. I think that's for the site to sort of determine who's at the table about who would in fact have to sign for it. Okay.
Eric, there is a question that that came in I hadn't heard yet. Then definitely want to maybe help out. It goes with maybe some specifics around the budget. You mind if we talk about that just momentarily, just really quickly?
Sure.
Let's see. They just want to get maybe the clarification, or could you revisit the piece on the budget in regards to the budget amount, and even within, like, say, the maximum amount for the entire span of the grant solicitation, and even other pieces of the budget? Would you mind revisiting a couple of those parts as well?
Well, and this is for which category? I'm sorry.
For either category, correct? If you could, for all the categories. Mm-hmm.
So you want to know the budget? Well, the amount is pretty much, you got to show the calculations as was laid out in the solicitations. The roles and responsibilities. I think that the more clear thing is look at the designs that are set forth in the budget worksheet. Sort of walks you through the various components that we're using as a way of measuring how folks go about expending the dollars. I think that's kind of the process here. If you look at, if the person asked in terms of the categories, I think the budget worksheet sort of pretty much is fairly standard about how you set about what the cost would be to implement the project designs. I don't know if there's a specific question about the budget that they might want to.
Yeah. I think they were asking maybe the full amount of the
3-year grant, The total amount?
Yes, yes.
If we apply for a 3-year grant, do we need to submit detailed budget for each of the 3 years or just for year 1? Well, if you would show a 3-year budget detail for the 36 months. So that's the logistics of that. So it'd be something for each year up to 3 years.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. And just as a reminder to folks, in any other additional questions that you have or even detailed questions that you may have, even outside of the webinar, you can submit them to the response center at the 1-800 number on the screen being displayed, and also to the email address here as well, if you have any additional questions regarding that.
I see another question pertaining to budget. It is $775,000 total, not times 3 years. That was the question. Are grantees required to pay for their own transportation for experts to provide training at their sites? The Category 2, the Category 1 grantees required to pay for their own transportation for experts? No, they will not have to subsidize the trainings that come to their sites. Are grantees, applicants required to address all 5 core areas, or are the 5 core areas a list of options? I would be inclined to answer that to the best that you can speak to those core areas as an applicant, do such. Those are the core areas that the officer deemed as important as far as creating a continuum for addressing the violence in a school setting. To that end, I think it would behoove an applicant to speak to those 5 core areas in some shape or form. If matching funds are solicited to support the proposed post-award, do they need to be added to the budget as an addendum? Well, we have asked for any funds that you could be leveraged to be submitted as part of the application, so by all means, bring that to the attention of the reviewers. So certainly I would look at it as an add to the budget, not as an addendum. Do you consider trauma-informed school and restorative practice to be evidence-based? I think the documentation would speak to evidence-based. Certainly you can send that question to grants.ncjrs.gov. We're still having some discussions about nonprofit eligibility for Category 1 and how a private agency is defined. There seems to be some confusion. Please send that your query to grants.ncjrs.gov. We will certainly try to get some clarification for you about eligibility. We've had a number of questions about clarity. Schools are considered not-for-profit. Can they apply for Category 1s? Yes, they can. They are public entities. In some cases, yes, they will. Private schools are encouraged to apply as well for Category 1. Do county and public agencies, are they eligible? Yes, they are. Can proposed programs operate in conjunction with educational programs conducted at secure residential programs for juveniles, such as detention, corrections, camps, community-based and residential treatment facilities? please send that question to grants@ncjrs.gov. Someone has made a note about the core requirements. They're saying that it's a heavy requirement. Each of these areas could be a major project on its own. The question is it mandated that they do all 5 core requirements? I will certainly try to get you an answer to that question in a timely way. If we are collaborating with another agency for Category 2 services, is that a completely different application? I'm assuming that if you're having an application as a Category 1 primary site, if you collaborate with another agency for Category 2 services, is that a completely different, is that a different application? Again, Category 2 is training and technical assistance. But I'm not quite clear about the collaboration piece, but if anyone who wants to be the lead applicant for Category 2 must be mindful of the respective criteria to do such. But it's certainly to someone's choosing to apply for either Category 1 or 2. Can Category 1 request serve early childhood or preschool? I'm sorry to say that's not the target population for this effort. Though elementary is part of the continuum, at minimum we suggested middle schools and high schools, but early childhood and preschools are not the target for this initiative. Okay. Where can we go if we need help writing this grant? I think there was a suggested resource tool was referenced earlier. That's www.ojjdp.gov/grants/solicitations. And you can look at the FY 2019 FAQs. That might be helpful to answering some of the questions about having in terms of writing the grant. Please define improved school safety and climate. And provide preferred measurables. Well, our measurables are indicated in Appendix A if you want to get a sense of what it is that the kind of data that we like to see the applicants give some consideration to for the projects. But, you know, when you talk about the premise on which this project is being addressed with this violence and victimization, then I think it's the genesis of to your questions of what safety might be for your community. Certainly, what sort of standards you want to bring to bear, and addressing what's happening in the target neighborhoods or communities where the school will be, project effort will be happening. Any measurables that address those things, I think, speaks to the core issue of safety. When you talk about addressing violence and victimization in any kind of level. If your organization has not previously been funded for the proposed amount, can you use a fiscal agent demanded? Fiscal agents have certainly worked with a number of our grants in the past. The answer would be yes. Category 2, do you want to describe the problem of youth violence and victimization, or the gaps and needs of training and technical assistance, or both? I think it would behoove you to give consideration to both lenses. If you're applying to be the training technical assistance provider to these very diverse organizations and respective needs that they might bring to bear. They run the spectrum, so what details are you looking for in an executive summary chart? Category 2. I'll go back to what was referenced earlier, competencies and capabilities organizationally, some level of past performance, some level of some histories of doing similar work on any level, federal, local. That would be some of the things I think would be ingredients for an executive summary. We are back to that question again. How would you define a private agency? We made great pains I must say, in these solicitations to say what a public agency was. So I'm going to defer again to those powers that be at NCJRS grants.gov to try to speak to that private agency concerns that we've heard articulated time and time again. I'll leave it at that. Please submit your question to grants.gov. How do two agencies interact if your project needs specific tech training? How do we enlist the support of the appropriate Category 2 advisor under this? Well, if you're applying as a Category 1, hopefully our efforts in identifying a Category 2 TA provider will speak to that, because that person who will be given that responsibility will have a responsibility to respond to all the other 8 sites that are selected as far as technical assistance and all the other goals and objectives that were referenced earlier. So that will be taken care of by way of the respective agency or organization that's identified as the TA provider. Another question about the TA. Does Category 2 applicants of the TTA model need to map into a conceptual model for delivering TA? I'm going to certainly take that questions to grants ncjrs.gov. Okay, does. Can a tribal nation which may have had their own social service department, medical organization, police force be still considered multi? Yes, it will, can be considered as a multidisciplinary team. Again, there's a dual phrase here, agency or disciplinary. So you covered social services, health, and law enforcement in that question alone. So that would be very clearly yes, a yes to that. Another question. I have a question here about where the okay. Category 1 applicants is the focus of this opportunity on providing services in a school setting for trauma, violence exposed youth, regardless of where that violence occurs, or is it the focus of this opportunity to deliver service in any sense to youth who have experienced trauma and violence in school? The idea about this initiative is to the universal application approach. It's only be for those kids who have been identified, exposed, and certainly there will be occasions where there will be interventions to support them, but there's also the thinking here is this initiative will be applied to all the kids in the school setting, not targeted specifically for individuals. Certainly is the system once they become identified, but the idea is to bring all these supportive services for prevention and interventions to the school system. It's a school-based in its totality, so all youth are to be impacted is the thinking here. Is there any? Will the various sites be budgeting for travel for their staff to attend TA, or will the that will be, the travel will be pretty much for the TA providers. If you mean if they were to come to your site to do the various assessments and the on the ground work, the TA provider will be paying for that. Yes, I see. There's a question. Category 2 applicants need to discuss specific needs of the target community instead of national data. I stand corrected. You're right. Category 2, the TA provider will certainly be required to speak of the national data as it relates to school-based interventions. That is correct. The TA provider will not know the identified target communities in advance. Thank you for being able to make that clarification. Are you expecting TA providers will use some form of online training for TA to offset travel? I would imagine it would run the gamut of online training to peer-to-peer exchanges, conference calls, etc. Yes.
And as Eric is reading through the questions there, I just wanted to remind folks you can always submit any questions that you like post-webinar to grants@ncjrs.gov. Also, don't forget you have the telephone number here as well that you can utilize to submit your questions. And for some of our audience members who asked in the chat pod, please note that we are indeed recording the webinar and we'll have it available on our NTTAC YouTube channel at a later date as well.
An interesting question here. Who is considered a victim for this proposal? Well, I hope that the applicants will give us their description of what that means and look like in their respective communities. Are we talking only students? Well, it's a school-based initiative, but some we are speaking to the various challenges that are in the communities that these students come from. Are we speaking to those who have been victimized at school as well as in the community? I would say yes, yes, yes. So again, the lens for which the proposal speaks to address the issue of violence and victimization is for you to identify and present to the office. And various challenges and efforts that you're going to bring to bear to address those particular challenges in these communities is what you need to make OJJDP aware of, respectively. Can this be used for funding of a private organization starting an LDG support group to prevent homelessness? I think that probably would not be. Can this be used for funding of a private organization starting an LDG? Well, again, this is a school-based violence prevention effort. I like that party to determine for themselves the merits of applying for a grant opportunity of this sort.
And just as a reminder to folks, yes, you will receive an email from Adobe Connect when when the video is ready. Please be sure to check your email for a correspondence from Adobe Connect, and it will have the evaluation for this webinar, and it will also include the location for our YouTube channel, where you will see where the recording for this webinar will be posted. And I'll be sure to repeat this for those of you on the line as well when a little later on in today's webinar when we wrap up.
Got a question from a university affiliate looking to partner with community-based youth justice organization to evaluate and improve organization's interventions. Is this in line with the RFP? If we could line up with the requirements specific in the school-based initiatives, target audience, the multi-tiered, multi-agency collaboration. Certainly I put forth whatever this university's partnership proposed to do in terms of addressing violence and victimization in the respective community. I don't believe I answered this question. Can the proposed programs operate in conjunction with education programs conducted as secure residential programs for juveniles, such as detention centers and residential treatment facilities? I'm going to ask that that question be tabled and sent to grants at ncjrs.gov.
Eric, it looks like also someone asked, is there a preferred performance measure for school safety and climate, or is there a standard format?
And I think the response was if we suggested in the solicitation in Appendix A, performance measures that we're looking to have applicants be responsive to, that might be a good place to start.
Great, thank you. And just as a reminder to folks, again, you can submit other additional questions to grants at ncjrs.gov, and also you can submit your questions to the 1-800 number that we have displayed on the slide here as well, just as a reminder.
Is there a preference for one school, multiple schools, or a whole district, or are all three configurations equally competitive? I think it would behoove the applicant to present however they want to address youth violence and victimization. They want to do it through a school district or a locale or a targeted school. I think that's a call that they certainly can make for the office in this presentation.
And just as a reminder, again, to our audience, that the webinar will be recorded and placed on NTTAC's YouTube channel. And again, if you have any other additional questions that come in after the webinar, don't forget you can submit them to the Resource Center at the 1-800 number listed on the slide here, and also at the email address listed to the slide here, grants@ncjrs.gov. And Eric, it looks like we have the questions are starting to slow down just a little bit, so we can maybe encourage folks to continue to submit, or if you had any other questions that you'd like to address that you see, we have maybe about 5 more minutes or 3 more minutes left for questions.
It's a question: if you are a single school, would you require a letter of commitment from the district or from the principal of the specific school? I think either or would suffice, the principal or Is the strategic plan attached with the same document as the executive summary? No, it's not. They're very specific details that are outlined for a strategic plan. And again, you're encouraged to respectfully look at the solicitation guide and see what that entails. But as the solicitation stated, you have to have a current plan in place. You must have an existing plan. That's one of the dictates of being in the pool of applicants for these funds. So if you have a collaborative body, then I presume that there's some plan that you might have existence, and you might want to identify how these monies might support new strategies or current efforts. There's a question on employee compensation waiver. Again, I suggest you send it to the grants@ncjrs.gov. I think it speaks to executive compensation. Is a letter of commitment from a partner sufficient, or must it be a formal MOU? I think in the best of worlds, you want a formal MOU by way of presentation. However, I did mention that there are letters of support certainly addressed to the administrator for OJDP. We asked for that as well.
All right, looks like we have about 3 minutes remaining. So I guess, Eric, whenever you're prepared, if you'd like to wrap up, just let me know ahead of time and I can finish this up.
Well, I certainly thank you for your time, and certainly encourage you to submit your proposals. And if there are some questions that are left unanswered, I know they are, then certainly we'll be challenged to get to you in a timely way, because I know May 20th is looming, and we'll try to be expeditious in getting you the kind of answers that you need to move forward preparing your respective grant applications. Thanks for your time.
All right, great. Thank you, Eric. So thank you all again for joining today's webinar. And I'd like to thank Eric Stansberry for coming on and providing information for the grant solicitation. Just a reminder to folks that you can contact NTTAC through the website displayed on this slide. You can stay up to date on the latest information by signing up for NTTAC's TTA listserv. Also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook at OJJDP TTA. You can contact OJJDP via the help desk by following the contact information on this slide. And do you have a TTA need? Well, please submit a request for help via the OJJDP TTA 360 platform through the link that's displayed on this slide. And as a reminder, the webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube channel, where you can view past webinars. For event transcript and supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. And lastly, as a reminder to folks, I would like if everyone could please take about 5 minutes to complete the feedback evaluation. Again, thank you all for joining us for today, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.